When politicians want to spend money, they often talk about how new and bigger programs are an investment to improve economic growth. Much of this is empty rhetoric, of course, but some people, maybe even a few of the politicians, actually do think bigger government is good for growth. I'm Dan Mitchell of the Cato Institute. In this video from the Center for Freedom and Prosperity, we're going to examine the empirical evidence about the relationship between economic growth and the size of government. In a previous video, we looked at some of the theoretical issues. In that video, we reviewed 8 different reasons why government spending undermines economic performance. But we also acknowledged that some expenditures help growth by creating the conditions for a well-functioning market economy. The challenging issue is determining the point where government gets too big. The honest answer is that it is very difficult to pinpoint the right level of government, especially since there are other factors that also play an important role in determining growth, which was explained in our video discussing the 5 key conditions for prosperity. But by looking at real-world evidence, we can at least get a pretty good idea whether we should be making government bigger or smaller. Let's start by comparing nations with big governments and nations with small governments and see which ones enjoy more prosperity. And to make sure the analysis is fair, we'll limit ourselves to Western democracies. Government is huge in Cuba, for instance, but comparing Cuba's misery with, say, Hong Kong's prosperity won't tell us much about the impact of government spending when there are so many profound policy differences between the two jurisdictions. With that key caveat in mind, let's compare the United States with France, Germany, Denmark, and Sweden. These are all Western industrial democracies. They are similar in many respects, with good scores on most measures of economic freedom. Indeed, Denmark is actually more free market than America in areas other than fiscal policy. So we have a pretty good data set. Let's start by comparing the size of government in our 5 nations. As you can see, the United States is the small government jurisdiction in our group, though that's not exactly a big achievement considering the alternatives. Let's now look at living standards based on several different measures. In public policy debates, people sometimes are guilty of cherry-picking just one data source to bolster their cause, but we're going to use a broad range of measures from a broad range of sources. Heck, our data is mostly coming from international bureaucracies with a left-of-center perspective, so it's safe to say these numbers are not designed to make the U.S. look good. As you can see from all these charts on the screen, the United States is more prosperous than these other nations with bigger governments. It doesn't matter whether we measure per capita GDP, average individual consumption, per capita private consumption. It doesn't matter whether we're looking at World Bank data, International Monetary Fund data, OECD data, or even Danish Finance Ministry data. In every case, people in the United States enjoy more income. Now, critics might say that this is just anecdotal evidence, and that's a fair point. Even though we have picked nations that are similar in most respects, maybe there is some unknown factor that accounts for America's better economic performance. So let's look at scholarly research that uses statistical regression analysis to isolate the impact of government spending on prosperity. Well, it turns out that critics will be disappointed. In the past few decades, a wealth of scholarly research has found a negative link between government spending and economic output. Now, we don't want this video to last too long, so on your screen you will see just a sample of what top academics have published in leading academic journals such as Public Choice, the Journal of Monetary Economics, the Journal of Macroeconomics, and the European Economic Review. We also have findings from the prestigious National Bureau of Economic Research. And perhaps the biggest surprise is that left-wing international bureaucracies also are producing research showing the negative impact of excessive government. I realize this information is going by on your screen very quickly, but feel free to pause the video if you want to digest some of the details. I also invite you to send an email to the address at the bottom of the screen, and the Center for Freedom and Prosperity will send you links to papers that contain all this information. Let's conclude by looking at the optimal size of government. In the public finance literature, there is something known as the Ron curve, which is sort of a spending version of the Laffer curve. The Ron curve is based on the theory that there is very little growth when there is no government because it is hard for people to be productive in a state of anarchy. As governments then begin to provide core public goods such as rule of law and protection of property rights, there is a positive relationship between government spending and growth. But then, as politicians begin to spend money on transfer programs and subsidies and pork barrel spending, this relationship turns negative, and larger levels of government mean lower amounts of growth. As always, thanks for watching, and I want to take this opportunity to express my appreciation to those of you who have been helping to distribute these videos. We rely on viral marketing, and this project has been far more successful than we thought it would be because of your help. The Center for Freedom and Prosperity appreciates your assistance.